to a panel discussion. There'll be much of Ilka's remarks, no doubt, that will come through into this, much of Heather's remarks that will come into that. And I know that one of our panelists is doing a quick mic changeover. But I'm going to invite the gentlemen who are mic'd up, come to the stage. And what I'll do is also introduce you as you come on up as well, because I'm really looking forward to this. Let me grab the biographies, because I'm just going to give you a couple of quick highlights as you take your seats. So we are joined today by James Tufts, who's the Partner of Markets and Business Development at EY. He is also the UK FS Diversity and Inclusiveness Partner Sponsor, advocating for a culture of belonging and helping to drive the organisational D&I agenda. Also joined by Nick Atkinson, who's the Chief Officer of Technology and Operations for Visa. Nick is responsible for the development of the next generation processing platform, Open VisaNet, a technology leader with more than 25 years of industry experience and a background in architecture, solution delivery and consultancy. We're also joined by Matt Griggs, who's the Head of Technology Infrastructure at Fidelity International. He is responsible for all the IT infrastructure related services. Think data centers, networks, databases, desktop services and service management. And also, of course, cloud transformation is a really big part of his role, not to mention data. Won't surprise you at all that data comes into that some way, shape or form. And last but not least, I'm delighted to welcome Russ Shaw, CBE, who is the founder of Tech London Advocates and Global Tech Advocates. He originally founded London Tech Advocates before taking it globally back in 2013 to ensure an independent voice of the technology community was heard, but with a particular focus on the private sector. And he's been championing London as a global tech hub ever since. Gentlemen, welcome. It's great to have your company. Thank you so much for being part of the discussion. Now, while Heather was speaking, I opened up a Slido question, which was, does your company actively encourage allyship, and if so, how? And I have to say, it was mixed results. Those of you who are on Slido, you can go in and read them yourselves as we go through, and there will be a report afterwards capturing all of these as well. Really mixed. Some saying very visible, some saying BAU, some saying we don't have anything at all. So I'd love to get into this discussion about why inclusive allyship really matters. And I wonder if we could start. Let me just get straight to the questions, if you would. When we start thinking about what do truly inclusive working environments look like? So let me ask you a very direct question, which is, how have you taken positive action to improve diverse representation? And I'm going to ask each of you to look at it from a different point of view, if you would. And Nick, I'm coming to you first as well. First of all, thinking about teams particularly. Yeah, so I think one of the most important things we've done is really invest in our employee resource groups. So these are really key for, kind of having a diverse representation within the organisation. And the important thing is really is sponsorship and leadership. So having good leaders there. I'm lucky to have my leader of the Women in Technology group with me here today. She's doing a great job of leading that team. I'm also a sponsor of the Viable Accessibility ERG. And I think having great sponsorship, having great leadership of these things really then supports the team to transform, having this group of people who are there to focus on these things very specifically. I think then three things really looking at, well, bringing, like Ilka said earlier, bringing those ERG activities into the business as usual. So this isn't a project, a program of work. They are, they're kind of guardians, I think, of these initiatives, but then also making sure that that's part of what you do day in, day out, month in, month out, as part of the regular processes, and really partnering with your people team to make sure you've got the data available to look at what's going on in your organisation, and also cascading that through, because it's not just taking this as the responsibility at the top, looking at company-wide representation, but making sure that people within the team understand their role in this, and making sure that they're looking at how we make sure that we've got a diverse employee base. I think then looking at the pipelines that we've got, working with our talent acquisition team, making sure that we've got those strong relationships to make sure that we've got the right pipelines coming into the organisation to make that difference. That's the only way these things are going to change. We know we've got a problem at the moment. We've talked about the 20%. This isn't good enough. This isn't what we need for our organisations. This isn't what's going to make us successful. So we need to work very closely to make sure that we're getting those pipelines into the organisation, and also working with very specific generation of pipelines. So we've been working with a company called TechSwitch, who
offer a kind of return to work, a coding boot camp for people, women who are looking to return to the workplace in a different role. And we're still in the early days, but something that's looking very promising. And then I think finally, like looking at the community that you're in and representing, kind of demonstrating your allyship through what you do within your community and across different ERGs as well. So we've been doing a lot of work with London Youth to try and inspire some of the young people within London to try and, again, demonstrate that technology is not a thing that's just for geeks or whatever, but is normal, a normal, accessible opportunity for people. And also, very specific things. We've got a development centre in Reading, and we work a lot with the girls' schools in Reading, and do a lot of kind of encouragement there for people to get involved in STEM, and also, again, to demonstrate that there's employers in the local area who can offer these kind of roles. So really looking at kind of holistically and trying to offer different ways of changing things.
And of course, I imagine that has a huge impact on the pipeline of the future as well. Which
fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, which is a great idea. Well, let's sort of pick up that point about community and sort of push it one step along and bring in you, Russ, if it would. Sure. Just think about, when we think about what inclusive working environments really look like from an industry point of view. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think the industry, the tech industry, has a huge challenge because we're 80% white men. And so part of what we do in our advocates communities is we've created different working groups. And our largest ones happen to be our Women in Tech and our Black Women in Tech groups. We also have groups that focus on the LGBTQ community. We've got a Tech for Disabilities group. We've got a Young Entrepreneurs group that's focusing on how do we support young, diverse entrepreneurs in the London tech ecosystem. And I think their voice in this is hugely important in terms of sharing ideas of what they're experiencing, being a safe place where they can network and talk to each other, but also how do we make sure that we're bringing the white men in our community, because we have a lot of those too, into those sessions where they can hear women, for example, speak about the issues and challenges that they face in the workplace. And that is a vital, I think, part of what we're trying to do here. And to then amplify that more broadly to say, Houston, we have a problem with diversity and inclusion in tech. What can we do to fix it? Which is why I'm thrilled to be here today.
And it's really important because when you start thinking...
Things. One is at the corporate level, and I've seen a bit of a sea change over the last couple of years. We've got far more benefits for our diverse audience. We have equal parental leave that's just been, introduced to the organisation. We've got care programs, special care days that, 5 days a year that you can take to spend with your family members if they're not so well. So I think there's many things that we can do at a corporate level. We have return to work schemes. We have lots of different schemes at that corporate level. And then in the technology function, I'm going to give an example actually, is about listening and acting. I was part of a reverse mentoring program, and I was talking to the person that was mentoring me, and I was asking questions about how do we introduce young talent into the organisation that's diverse. And she said, and this is no plug, we haven't rehearsed this, Code First Girls. Have you heard of Code First Girls? And I went, no, I haven't heard of Code First Girls. And within 6 months, we had listened and we'd acted, and we've got our first cohort that have arrived in October. They're introduced into the organisation, and we have plans to introduce more. So I think it's really about listening and then acting on the advice that we're being given and the feedback that we're being given by our employees.
And what really strikes me about that is that we often see these things as big corporate programs that take a long time to change. But if you can do that within 6 months, yeah. I mean, imagine what that could be if that were extended way beyond as well. James, I'd love to get your thoughts as well about, when we think about truly inclusive working environments, what are the magic things you've done?
Yeah, well, excuse me, I have a bit of a cold this morning. I don't think there's any magic. I think it is a journey, but we can't wait forever, and so we need to accelerate it. I suppose going back to basics, though, for us, it's about the individuals having real trust that this is meaningful and that it's going to be consistent as well. I think in a big organisation like ours, we have 25,000 employees. in the UK. Many have a great experience, but a sizable number don't. And we need to ensure that that's not the case and that everyone does. And for me, that comes down to those trust points. We have all the programs and such like that others have mentioned, but it does come down to leadership, sponsor and support. And unfortunately, it does come down, therefore, to things like KPIs and how do you monitor that progress, but also reward as well as, pull those up who aren't doing the right thing. I remember one of the partners saying to me about 12 months ago that are we making it a non-level playing field for males? And I said, well, no, we're not. But what we're doing is we're taking away some of the barriers that others have had. And we talk very about not about trying to fix someone. We're not trying to fix the woman so that, in this case, she sort of fulfills a certain, role or stereotype that we want. We're not trying to do that at all. And it comes down to that understanding. I said, no, we're not making an unlevel playing field. But even if we were for a small space of time, that addresses probably 2,000 years of it being tilted the other way. And I think that was accepted as being a fair point. But it does come down, I think, very much to leadership. Our managing partner is a woman, and the leadership teams that we have women and other groups representing a very big part of them. And it is, I agree, it has changed in the last couple of years. I think COVID was a catalyst for many things, but including this focus on inclusiveness. And I think we have used that as a platform to accelerate some of that.
And you know what was really interesting when you were saying that was I got a discernible nod from all three of you when you mentioned the word KPIs, which is really fascinating because I think, when we talk about the quotas and when we think about measurement and we're all obsessed, in the world of technology, we love our KPIs, and that it should very much kind of be embedded in the soul of that as well, which is fascinating. But can I move the conversation on to, what does good allyship look like? And what does that feel like as well? And really curious to know sort of what the benefits of being allies are. We've talked a little bit about reverse mentoring as one example. Russ, could you start to kick us off, if you would? Any insights into the ways in which you see men supporting men in their allyship?
Yep. If I can also just address the KPI question, which is, it's great that everybody's measuring it, but I also say, let's not drink the Kool-Aid, folks, because the metrics haven't moved. If you look at the number of women, for example, in the technology sector, and there's a growing sense of frustration out there that it's still stuck at 20% of women are in the technology sector. So I think it's important to bear that in mind. I think it's great. Companies need to measure on a detailed level. Coming back to your question about male allyship, I guess, I'm looking at all the men in the room. And it's great to see so many men here today. I think it's a really powerful thing. But for me, my message is, what are you going to do when you leave here today? When you go back to your office or meet with your team, what one thing can you do? Because honestly, I think that's where this tends to fall down. And it's not that difficult, find a woman in your organization, find a person of color in your organization, just say, look, I was at this great We Are Tech Women Level Up Summit, and I want to do something. What can I do? How can I listen to what your challenges are? And I think if, we collectively do that as a community, then maybe not only will the awareness increase, because I think awareness has improved in terms of D&I, but the actual steps, the actions that we're taking to move the needle will start to go in the right direction. And so for me, today, when we look at the KPIs and the metrics, are the actions being deployed, even at the most basic level, to ensure that the needle is moving? That's what I'm looking at.
And often a kind of response to that is going, yes, absolutely, if you can present a really strong business case. And I wonder, Matt, if I could come to you on that particular sort of point of view as well. When we think about as leaders, the commercial benefits on offer, we know the data tells us. I'd love to get your thoughts on why this matters.
Look, we've talked about it quite a few times, the speakers already. A diverse group of people drives better outcomes for our business and our customers. It's proven. In Fidelity, we've got 3,500 technicians, so it's a third of our business. And the lines are very blurred now between a finance company and technology because it's so close. So going back to that point about needing a diverse group of individuals that are driving value for our customers, we need to develop the right applications for our customers to consume. That we need diversity within that, and that's got to be our drive. And just to add to that, that should help us to retain talent. You know, the retention of talent is so important. It's not about just attracting talent, it's about retaining the talent that we have. And yeah, I think I'll stop.
Well, every business leader will, you know, I always love to get the undeniable truths, and one of them is the cost of hiring.
Yes.
If you bring somebody in and they leave, they're partly about the importance of the culture, but actually why this matters as well. And I think when we talk about the journey, because every organization's on a journey, and thinking about progress, I mean, Russ, you were remarking there that you know, this isn't going away. And I think enlightened leaders get that. But James, I'd love to get your thoughts about, you know, evidence of progress, and what impact do you observe, and what do you particularly measure that evidences that?
So, I mean, I think the KPIs are important, as I come back to those. So we have public targets, for example, and we have seen, so we have 48% of our staff are female. 5 years ago, the partner representation on that was about 16 or 17%. It's now 26. Now that's just one element of that, but that forensic focus. And then what we do then is we drill that down. So the service line leads will have business reviews where all of the attributes of DE&I, and obviously it's a very broad topic, are given as much focus as sales, as financials, as operations as well. And that, you know, wasn't something that was happening even 36 months ago, and we have seen that. It does take time, but we have seen that come through. I think going back to the imperative though, many of the firms in the audience today are clients, I'm very pleased to say, of ours, and they demand this as well. They demand diverse teams. Now, they know that gives them a better outcome, but that's also something that we have to think about. And going back to the talent point, it's not only retention, but also attraction of talent. You know, individuals, particularly the youth of the day, they demand this of the firms that they're joining. So there's so many reasons why this isn't a negotiable topic. It is something that we have to you know, really face up to. So I think all of those, you know, don't get me wrong, this is not easy, and there are certainly things that we still need to work on, but all of the sort of clear rationale of why this is the right thing and an important thing to do are certainly there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wonder if I could pick up on your remark there about this is what employees are expecting of us in a way. And I think about the rising talent that's coming through the organisation, and Nick, I'd love to ask you a question about that, which is thinking about rising leaders. Because, how can I put this? We're all of a certain age, I think it's fair to say. We're a certain kind of tier of demographic, if you like. We get the joke. How do you encourage the next level of rising leadership talent to not only consider allyship, but to properly step up and see this as part of their role?
Yeah, I think Heather mentioned it earlier, where role modelling is so important here. Again, and Ilka mentioned it, it's like kind of you think you're role modeling, but then doing something different, doing something that's outside of your comfort zone. You know, putting my photo up on LinkedIn saying that I was coming to this has had a massive shift in my profile on LinkedIn, what's going on LinkedIn, the way that people are thinking of me, both within my organization and outside of my organization. And I kind of didn't get that. I kind of, you know, I understand social media, we kind of, you know, post on LinkedIn, but it's kind of very, I guess, transactional historically, but these kinds of things really matter, and being able to demonstrate that this is what you are here to do, and then this brings your team along. They see you doing this, then that brings them along to understand the same thing. I also think, you know, we've been talking to holding to people to account for numbers and things like that. That's critical as well. This isn't a negotiable thing. If we're to be a successful organization, we need to be a diverse organization. So we need to you know, make sure that we realize that. And again, as technicians, as technologists, you know, any program or project of work we do, we'd make clear ways of making that happen. And I think sometimes we kind of shy away from this a bit and say, oh, we've got to stop our unconscious bias, but let's be consciously biased about what we're trying to achieve here, and do something proactive. And then, you know, that brings allyship throughout the organisation. Yeah.
And the proactivity is really, really important. But I wonder if I could just have a bit of pause for thought and, you know, recognise the environment in which we're existing. You know, I wonder and I worry about, as we start navigating tough economic times, that there might be a response that goes, this is great, it is all very, very good, but actually it is not going to be heart and center of what we must care about as we try and drive our organizations successfully through these very tough times. And I wonder whether allyship's at risk of becoming sort of a bit peripheral. How do we keep this in focus? And Russ, can I kick off with you, and then I'll be coming to everybody else on the panel because I think it's important.
Sure, I guess maybe two thoughts on this. One is, the good news about all of this is we know that the business case for diversity and inclusion has demonstrated time and time again that when you have a diverse organization, a diverse and inclusive management team, you're more successful and you're more profitable. And I think companies get that, and we're hearing great examples of that. But I also think we have to, culture-wise, keep pushing this up to the top of the agenda. Every organization, every startup, every scale-up, every tech company that I come across has talent as their number one issue. They can't find enough talent, they're struggling to find diverse talent, et cetera. And I was thinking, just coming in today, the front page of today's City AM has Nick Reed, who's the CEO of Vodafone, on the cover, and he's been there for 4 years, and he's been let go or fired or whatever you want to describe it because of poor financial performance. The stock price hasn't performed. Imagine what the world would look like in this space if he were on the cover of today's newspaper, not for that, but because Vodafone didn't deliver on the diversity and inclusion agenda. What kind of message would that send to the broader business community about how important this is? And I think the thing that I do see is, I meet a lot of investors who focus on ESG and D&I as a key part of it. It's starting to get higher and higher on the agenda. I do worry that the macroeconomic climate will get people to revert to type and say, well, all hands on deck, it's all about profitability. But I think in the coming years, if we could say this really needs to be an inherent part of how businesses do business, and boards will fire CEOs if they don't deliver on their DE&I agenda, I think that's where this goes next.
And I'm sort of thinking while you're talking about, let's go back to the last financial crisis and the amount of public sentiment discussion there was about by having non-diverse boards.
Yep.
Certain decisions were made that led us into tough times.
Yep.
So I wonder, what have we learned from this and how this is going to evolve? James, can I get your thoughts? Because you were saying there earlier that kind of in terms of the measurement around P&L and performance, etc. This is heart and centre. What are your thoughts about going into tough times?
I mean, I guess it's a similar point. As you say, the review of the crisis in 2008-9, which seems a long time ago now, but a lot of us lived through it, obviously. Herd mentality was one of the things that the regulators called out time and time again. Yeah. So I think organisations are super aware of that now. I think coming back to your point around the sort of focus on it and would someone get sacked for not meeting those targets. So we have with our regulator, anything that we have as a public target, we have to attest to them, and there are consequences around not meeting those. So I talked about our targets that we have in terms of partner representation, for example. I think there is a risk, right? It's true. I think it's a fair question that when things get really tough, will this be pushed down the agenda? It's certainly gone up the agenda significantly, as I think we've all said in the last couple of years. And I guess that's where you need strong leadership and champions to ensure that it's not just shoved back down, that it is called out. I think the reality is that it's such a coherent and fundamental part of our success now that it won't be allowed to be pushed back down. Even if, and this is something that the partner group have discussed, there are short-term consequences for financial, and by that they mean financial consequences to doing the right thing. Now, I'll be honest, we need to see that put into practice if that was the scenario that came along, but that is certainly the discussion that is taking place.
And I often hear, I was saying at the beginning of the conference that I have the podcast, and one of the things that I hear a lot of people talk about is we get it at the top, and we think about the groupthink that's come through the economic crisis and needing to have learnt from that. But it's that sticky middle. It's that sticky middle where actually enlightened leaders need more support from heads of D&I to kind of focus on that as well. And I'm really curious as we sort of think about, again, sort of staying on the topic of navigating tough times, but also picking up on the remark earlier about being super proactive, going in with eyes and minds open about ensuring that this stays top. Nick, I'd love to get your thoughts on what are you doing to make sure this absolutely remains heart and soul?
I think when times are tough, then, you know, every dollar in your budget counts, you know, so much more. And I think this is the time to really lean in and make sure that what you're spending your money on is critical. So something we've been focusing a lot of effort on is around our, you know, workforce planning now. You know, where we're thinking about these upcoming years, the potential difficulties that are there, thinking about our workforce plan very, very carefully and understanding, well, you know, what do we want to invest in, and making sure that those investments are very kind of, you know, clear and planned, rather than, you know, sometimes, you know, recruitment and acquiring talent can be a whoever comes to your front door. I think it can be a very reactive a piece of work. But I think more and more now we need to be more proactive and make sure that we're investing in, you know, the talent that we want to make our organisation successful. And, you know, like we've discussed, you know, looking for a diverse workforce is really key for that element. So really spending, you know, focusing on the money that we spend. This is an important part of our roles as leaders, to make sure we spend our money wisely. And I think when times are tough, it's even more so. So, you know, focusing on that is really key.
Yeah. And Matt, would you agree with that, or are there any other areas you're focused on?
No, totally. I mean, going back to the point on measures, you know, we have a very strong CEO who is very invested into diversity and inclusion. We will continue that journey. We have to retain the talent that we have today, and we will still hire. You know, that's just the natural world. People will come and go, and we will need to hire, and we will keep those measures in place. It's really important to us as an organisation. Going back to what everyone has said, that a diverse organisation brings better value for our business, our customers, and our employees.
Yeah. So those of you who noticed on the slide here, I've opened up another question for you as well. It's a free form for being kind to each other. And particularly as I think as we're navigating tough times, let's not remember the kind of the human beings and what they're going through while we're doing this as well. And it's interesting that sort of comes as heart and soul when we think about heart and literally the word soul, but the heart and soul of diversity and inclusion and allyship and enlightened leadership. And when we think about empathy and soft skills in strong leadership through tough times, this kind of seems to sit together. So thank you for the remark on that, by the way. Really, really appreciate it. I wonder if we could just close out with, I'm going to ask each of you to it's always a challenge with these things. One message, one thing. Imagine one thing. I mean, we're not going to get that, clearly. But I would love to get a quick audience takeaway, if you would, about how you could encourage more visible male allies in their organisations. If there was one thing you would say they should take away, what would it be? James, I'm coming to you first of all.
Okay, well, I think personally that allyship is really enjoyable for the individual doing the role as well. So I've obviously done the role a couple of times, and I've got probably more out of it than the individual I was mentoring or allying. So I think, you know, that is a message that needs to be made, that this is something that is, you know, just a benefit all round and something that you can learn from as much as anything else.
Wonderful. Matt, your thoughts on that?
I'm going to refer back to Ilka's comment about feeling uncomfortable. Just get out there and feel a little bit uncomfortable. It might not be in your zone, but just try it, because the value, to your point, the value that you get out of it is very rewarding.
And of course, one of the attributes of a great leader is getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. That is just heart and soul of who we are as individuals. Nick, your thoughts, if you would.
I think the statistic we saw earlier about 75% of men not being perceived as good allies, I think that needs to be challenged in terms of, you know, challenge the perception, because I think that I can't believe that's the reality, that only 25% of men are allies, and I think there's that opportunity to kind of say, well, if somebody is behaving in that way, well, challenge the behaviour. You know, it's not unprofessional to ask, well, you know, what are our statistics around gender? What are we doing about these things within our organisation? And pushing those things forward, because I think that organisations do know that diverse workforces are so important, and gender is a really important part of that, and especially in technology with where we are today. So, you know, challenging what if people perceive that people are behaving in those ways.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about call-out cultures, and the proactivity of challenge is incredibly important. Russ, as you look at the industry as a whole, and then also your global point of view as well, what message would you give this audience?
I think, again, to the men in the room, when you leave here today, recruit at least one other male ally. And if you can do that and get them to do the same, and just talk about, and I thought your point was an excellent one, which is It is a bit uncomfortable. You might not be sure about it, but you will be incredibly well received if you go back and share this behavior yourself and tap someone on the shoulder, a fellow male in your workplace, and say, you really should help do something like this. Get involved, do something, just go sit and listen. If you can recruit one other person, we've already doubled the number of people who could go out and be great male allies.
Wonderful. I have to say, this whole section, thinking about Ilka's opening remarks, then Heather's comments, and then also to be able to unpick this with the four of you and look at it from so many different points of view, and also, but just the really straightforward reality of recognizing the climate in which we exist as well, and why this has to remain heart and soul, and soul and center of everything that we're doing as well. It's been a fantastic conversation. Please join me in thanking the panel for all their thoughts. Thank you, gentlemen. Really appreciate it. Thank you.